Okay, I guess we're ready to start. I'm going to wave. I don't know if anybody can see me on the screen there. My name is Joanne Zurlo, and I am here at the beginning of a tag team presentation to talk a little bit about the history of the Symposium on Social Housing and history of working together for the animals. And so if this was a brainchild that came up from a number of us who are sitting at this panel, a collaborative effort between CAT, Center for Alternatives to Animal Testing at Johns Hopkins, our sister organization across the street, which was known at the time as the Department of Comparative Medicine, and I'm not going to remember the name now, so Eric, you can talk about that. USDA Animal Welfare Information Center, and OLAW, the Office of Laboratory Animal Welfare at the National Institutes of Health. And so we are going to give you a little bit of a historical perspective. And I'm starting because I guess I'm the oldest one here. No, not. Anyway, we started this 10 years ago after the new guide came out in 2011 that had this recommendation for a strong recommendation for social housing of social species of laboratory animals. And it was a little bit difficult at the time for certain species. And we thought that the best way to do this was to bring people together to have really working sessions, have experts talk in the area of animal behavior and discuss problems that people have been having in the labs with housing animals together that were problem situations like male mice and male rabbits, et cetera. So the goals of this, of course, were to improve animal welfare, promote quality science, because we know that animals that are housed singly can be very stressed, and of course follow the 3 R's: reduction, refinement, replacement. So the first one, as I mentioned, was in 2013, and we had it at the Natcher Center at NIH, which was a great place to do it. We were in a very central location, and we had, I think, about 150 participants who came. And the program, if you could advance one more. The program actually gave a historical perspective on social housing, an overview of what the expectations were from the various oversight and peer review groups were. And then we went into specifics of different species, so rabbits, pigs, non-human primates, and then talking about how to intervene behaviorally and how to do temperament testing so we could do better pair housing, et cetera. So that was a success, and we decided to take the show on the road. And we decided to collaborate with the University of Colorado, Denver, to do the second symposium. And that was held in 2014. And again, we were working on different species. And the first day we decided to dedicate to non-human primates because that seemed to be the most consequential and also some of the more challenging species to deal with. And so we did that on the first day. And then on the second day, we dealt with ruminants, rabbits, rodents, and pigs. So we were very fortunate at that particular conference to have Bernie Rowland as one of our keynote speakers. Sad to say that Bernie passed away a few years ago and is terribly missed in the community. He was a bioethicist who dealt with a lot of issues, particularly with laboratory animals, but all animals. He loved animals. And he gave a wonderful presentation, very memorable. And then we were very fortunate because we were in Colorado to get for the second speaker, Temple Grandin, who many of you know has done a lot of work, particularly with farm animals and ruminants, cattle and pigs, et cetera. And she was, again, fantastic. It was a wonderful meeting. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we did the 2-day presentations. Move ahead. And these presentations, the ones that I have listed on these slides, are all available on the AWIC website if you wanted to go and listen to them. They're very informative and entertaining in many ways too. So that brings us to 2014, and I'm going to turn the microphone over to Eric Hutchinson, who's going to continue in our journey over the 10 years.
Thanks, Joanne. So again, I'm Eric Hutchinson. I'm with Molecular and Comparative Pathobiology, which used to be Comp Med at Johns Hopkins University. I'm also Director of Research Animal Resources here. So one of the themes that we have really tried to hit on over and over and over again with first the Social Housing Symposium and then continuing at the 3R Symposium is practical solutions using state-of-the-art science. And so that's some of the presentations that I think I'm have been most engaged by throughout the years have been the ones that to me take kind of the cutting edge science and apply them in a applicable and practical way. So we went in the third symposium to UC Davis, the School of Veterinary Medicine there, and we did a tour of the primate center, which was definitely a highlight for me. We then had Brenda McCowan, who worked at the center, talk about macaque societies and how her studies of networks and macaque societies could be applied to successful social housing strategies for macaques. We then had Joe Garner, who is a real leader on mouse welfare, talk about the practical implications for social housing of mice. I don't know why that advanced without me. And then Greg Burns on MRIs of awake dogs, which I think was a great early foray into the larger 3Rs theme from social housing. So his talk was not necessarily on social housing, but it was on the idea of replacing lab animal dogs, so purpose-bred dogs, using the ability to gain mountains and mountains of important data from awake pet dogs. And so that was a kind of an early preview of our switch to a broader 3Rs theme. No, it won't advance there. Okay. Then for the fourth symposium, we went to Atlanta, Georgia, and specifically the CDC. One of the big highlights that I think many of us remember from the CDC tour was all the security around the CDC. And so it was a terrific workshop. It was a great time. It was a great chance to see a bunch of stuff that most people don't get to see. It came with a fair bit of paperwork. And so I think it presaged our conversion back to local meetings going forward. I will say we did have the great opportunity to partner with the Pair Housing Workshop. So another workshop at the time that was really focusing on giving people practical solutions and advice for how to enact the edicts of the guide. And we had a great panel that was able to join us in both of those meetings. So Molly Bloomsmith, Chris Coleman, Kate Baker, and several others, Melissa Truelove, many others that were able to do both of those. And a lot of participants did both our symposium and then continued on to the workshop. The other big highlight for me was it was the first time that Derek Brocksmith from Sinclair came to talk to us about social housing of pigs. And it was one of over the years, it's been one of the most popular talks that anybody's given was that talk on social housing of pigs. Now I'm going to hand it off to Kristina.
Thanks, Eric. It advanced to my slide, so we're going. I'm Kristina Adams. I previously worked for the Animal Welfare Information Center for many years, and I'm now the Digital Library Branch Chief at the USDA's National Agricultural Library. And I'm really happy to be here today. And I'm so glad this conference is continuing on because there's so much important information that's been shared over the years. The fifth symposium was held at the National Agricultural Library, so we did bring it back to the Washington, D.C. area. And this is a group of speakers and some of the organizers after the symposium. We brought everyone together, and when we were traveling and meeting in person, we used to have really fun dinner events as a way to get to know each other. I think it was usually the night before we started the conference. So now it should go to the next slide. This year we did a pre-conference tour at the National Zoo, and it was most memorable because it poured rain pretty much the entire day, and I think the temperatures dropped throughout. So by the end of it, we were all buying extra gear just to stay warm, umbrellas, long sleeve shirts. But we got to see the zoo's commissary and their elephant training program, among other things. And that was a different experience than we had provided prior to that. And then we had changed up the way that the symposium was conducted this year. We were trying, instead of all primates on the first day, we had various species that were spread across both days. So there were talks for rats and mice, for rabbits. Derek Brocksmith, whose talk was really popular the following year, came back to talk about social housing swine. We had old world primates, and Becca Franks closed that particular meeting with a talk on the psychological well-being of fish. And we heard from a number of people that that was really a unique, original, exciting talk. It was something we hadn't really been talking as much about in the community as I remember at that time. And she was looking at housing zebrafish in more semi-naturalistic environments. And as a library professional, I was also excited because during her talk, she did refer continuously to the importance of literature, historical literature. So that was really fun. The 6th annual symposium was brought back again to the library in Beltsville. And we went to the zoo for another pre-conference tour again, and it was a sunny day. So that's one of the orangutans going across their outdoor think tank area. And again, we got a number of behind the scenes and learned from the zookeepers, what they were doing in terms of social housing species that we were not as familiar with. And so that particular symposium, we reached out to the zoo community, and we had a number of them come and talk to us from the zoo perspective as a way to sort of bridge the gap between what we were doing in the research community and what they were doing in the zoo community, and have some conversations across that gap. We also had a focus on looking at animals and people, and how it's important that caring people working in the research community was so critical. And so Kathrin Shupley's talk was really interesting, where she had a class and had introduced them to these rats who had special names. They were trained to do things, and just the relationship that the students developed with the rats and the empathy that developed. Her argument was, that goes a long way to really caring for the animals. And Pat Turner's talk with establishing a culture of care sort of was linked to that, in that caring is so important, both for the people working in the research environment and especially for the welfare of the animals in those settings. And I think that was it for mine.
So we're moving on to the 7th annual 3R Symposium. I'm Pat Brown, and I'm from the Office of Lab Animal Welfare at NIH. And that particular year was 2020. And of course, we were planning to have this meeting in 2020 in June in person, but something called COVID-19 showed up instead. So we ended up quickly switching gears and preparing to provide a completely virtual program, which we, as you know, we've continued to this day. And we did have to get very familiar with Zoom very quickly. So by 2020, it had been almost 10 years. Back one, please. It had been almost 10 years since the guide 8th edition had come out, which had again was the cause for the start of the symposiums focused on social housing. So we thought at this point in time, there was enough articles out there, there was enough resources out there that institutions had very much taken on the social housing situation. So we decided to expand the topics and focus in a broader way on the 3 Rs of replacement, reduction, and refinement. So On day one, we started with, we still wanted it to be practical solutions and success stories as the title, with the idea that we did want to try and make things that were being presented, things that people could take home and use at their institutions. So we started with mini brain organoids as a key new topic that people could understand what was going on with those particular new alternatives. We also talked about and had presentations about the Grimace scale in mice and also non-human primates. We had discussions about the Arrive and Prepare guidelines, which are now being used hopefully across the research community to accurately provide information about how animals are used during the course of a research study. In the second day, we covered more about open science and the efforts to share data, which again is a way of replacement, is by using other people's data in cooperation. And also practical solutions in behavioral training. We had some talks on mouse and rat handling, pet dogs as human cancer models. Again, the idea of replacing laboratory animals to the benefit of the pet animals themselves, and also image-guided treatment of pets using human diagnostic techniques. Again, the idea of One Health. Next slide. So the keynote for that particular symposium was Dr. Barbara Natterson Horowitz. And I wanted to just highlight a little bit about what she presented and why. And what you can do, you see there in the photo, she's performing a transesophageal echocardiogram on a chimpanzee at the Los Angeles Zoo. That was her introduction to the idea of how much animals and people are alike. And how we can learn from them. So her presentation was on the importance of veterinary medicine and also environmental science, and how physicians can actually understand better about such things as cardiovascular disease and mental illness in humans. And she also discussed the creation of, can you go back please, of the Zubiquity conferences that came about because of her interests. She helped organize the first of these. And this is where doctors, MDs, nurses, and veterinarians can get together and talk about innovations in medical treatments that can be used for both humans and animals, and also in better understanding of shared diseases that both many vertebrate animals and humans have. So as has been mentioned, the recordings of all of these different presentations can be found on the AWIC website. And we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so the 8th annual symposium again was held virtually because the COVID was still hanging around. As you can see, the subtitle for that particular symposium was Pandemic-Driven Advances. And again, it focused on the idea of advances in animal welfare, advances in alternatives, and how in many ways those particular advances were impacting finding treatments and cures for COVID-19. So some of the sessions that were included were discussions on machine learning, literature searching, animal models in COVID research. And one of the special features of that particular year was a virtual tour of the USDA agricultural research facilities. Since we couldn't take people on a walk around, we had a virtual tour at the end of the second day. Okay, now we'll go to the next slide. And the keynote for that particular symposium was Dr. Dan Tagley from the National Center for Advanced Translational Sciences, also known as NCATS. And he presented on some of the NCATS projects that they're supporting, in particular related to microphysiological systems. That's one of their major focuses of NCATS, and the increased complexity that has been developing in both lung, liver, and kidney microphysiological systems, multiple organs on a chip. And those have been supported by NCATS for the development of models of addiction and also models of overdose. and also the development of chips with patient-derived cells in order to develop models of human disease. So one of the new programs that he talked about was about a program called SCENT, S-C-E-N-T, and that was used to develop electronic systems to mimic the dog's olfactory system, since dogs have such an excellent nose. To mimic that was developed in order to allow it to identify medical conditions by collecting the odors. He also discussed the partnership that NCATS has with NASA, using tissue chips to model age-related disease, and also how to miniaturize the chip system in space. And I'll pass it on to Kat.
Thank you. My name is Kathrin Herrmann. I work for the Center for Alternatives to Animal Testing. I will walk you through the 9th symposium we organized, and there we focused on collaboration to improve animal welfare and rigorous results. And one of our keynotes was by Professor Hanno Wirbel from the University of Bern in Switzerland. And he has this very important concept that we should not only focus on the 3 Rs, replace, reduce, refine, because those are more tailored to avoiding harm in animals, but we should also really focus on the benefit side of the scale. And there it's really important to have scientifically valid models, and they have to be reproducible. And what he pointed out were like the pitfalls, why things are actually not translatable and reproducible. And he highlighted what construct validity means. And yeah, that the course there is that we use animal models that have poor validity. Then he explained what can be done to improve internal validity and what can be done to improve external validity. And just to give you an idea about some of the other talks, I didn't even manage to list everything here. Just to give you a first impression, they can all be watched, as Joanne already said, on the AWIC website, and I highly recommend doing that. Another keynote we had this year was from ICVAM. That's the Interagency Coordinating Committee on the Validation of Alternative Methods. And there, Dr. Kleinsteuer told us a lot what they are doing, and was very interesting talk. Then we also looked at how you can refine and reduce animal use through mixed strain housing for laboratory mice. We had several talks on animal adoption programs. And then we also had a focus in that year on other countries, Africa, the continent of Africa, Latin America, and Asia, and how people advance the 3 Rs there, and what their obstacles are, and how they can be overcome. We also had a talk from the NC3Rs from the UK about a 3R self-assessment tool for research groups and institutions that can be used for free of charge online. So if you're interested, check it out. And we had another talk about handling, refined handling for mice, actually from the North American 3Rs Collaborative. And to my knowledge, they currently are running a study on how mice are handled these days, because I'm sure you know that the best practice approach is using either cup handling, or you either cup them with your hands, or you use tubes. And they are doing an assessment at the moment what's actually done in the labs currently. So if you want to participate in the survey, you can find it on their website. And so today, or the next 2 days, actually, we are excited to talk to you about how we can put the 3Rs in action. These principles have been around for quite a long time. And as you all know, we still have problems with the implementation of the 3Rs. And that's why I'm especially also excited about the first section that we will start at 9 a.m. But just to walk you through what we have planned for the next 2 days. First, we want to talk about the barriers to replacement and refinement. What are those? In the second session, we talk about how you find the right R for the right study. And the session 3 is then on the 3 R's implementation. But of course, it's a little bit in flux. Also already in the first session, for example, we try to talk about implementation as well. And so just to talk about the next upcoming presentations, after our reflection on the 10th anniversary of the symposium, we are going to hear from Thomas Hartung about orphan 3Rs. That means those 3Rs that weren't adopted. Then we will hear about a refinement and replacement options for non-human primates from 2 different speakers. Then we will hear another talk, how can we effectuate the 3Rs? And last but not least, in this session, we will have a discussion with 4 speakers about their personal experiences, what was adopted well when it comes to the 3Rs and what wasn't, and their thoughts on that.